Have you ever had a thought that frightened you so much that you immediately questioned what it meant about you? Maybe it was a sudden image. Maybe it was a disturbing what if. A thought that felt completely out of character for you. And instantly your mind went to, why would I think like that? Does this mean that something's wrong with me? Does this make me a bad person? If you've ever experienced that, then you're not alone. And what I want to explain today may bring you some relief. A thought is not the same as an intention. And a thought is not the same as an identity. Hi, I'm Cheryl, a therapist and the creator of the Heart to Heal method, a framework for emotional regulation, anxiety recovery, and understanding the deep patterns that keep people feeling stuck. I work with people experiencing anxiety, overwhelm, obsessive thinking, and distressing intrusive thoughts. One of the hardest things about intrusive thoughts is that people often suffer with them in silence. Not because these experiences are rare, but because people are afraid of what those thoughts might mean. They worry about things like, does this make me a bad person? Why would my mind create something like this? What if this says something about me, about who I really am? So they hide those thoughts and they quietly analyse them, and then they try to push them away, and then they seek reassurance. And often they become trapped in fear and shame. I want to say something really important to you here before we go any further. Having an unwanted, intrusive thought does not mean you want it, and it does not define who you are as a person. In many cases, these thoughts feel so distressing because they go against your values and the person you believe yourself to be. In this video, I'll explain why these thoughts happen, why they can feel so real and so frightening, and how therapy can help you reduce their power and rebuild trust in your own mind. Our brains create thousands of thoughts every single day. Some of these thoughts are useful. Some of these thoughts are really random, and some are completely meaningless. And if you've got a brain like mine that thinks of all sorts of stuff, the penguins have knees, things like that, then, you're not alone. But occasionally, a thought appears that feels really shocking. It may be a violent thought, it may be an inappropriate thought, it may feel completely unlike you. And the reason it becomes so powerful is often because your brain immediately labels it as important. So your mind will say, pay attention to this. This could really mean something. This could be dangerous. And suddenly, instead of letting that thought just pass through you, you start investigating it. You start asking questions. You start asking yourself, why did I think that? Where did that come from? What does that say about me? Could I actually be capable of this? But the distress you feel is often not evidence that the thought is true. It's often evidence that the thought feels deeply threatening to your values. And that's what makes them really scary. One of the biggest things that keeps intrusive thoughts alive is the attempt to get rid of them completely. People will often try to analyse what the thought actually means. They will try to prove that they would never act upon that thought. And they replay the situation again and again and again. And the other thing that people tend to do is to seek some reassurance from others. They might tell somebody about that thought that they've just had. The other things that they do is monitor the feelings to check if they're safe. Do they really feel safe with that thought? And this makes sense really when you think about it, because your brain is trying to protect you. And it's thinking, if I can solve this thought and figure out where it's come from, then I can finally feel safe. One of the things I want to say to you here at this point is, we can all have intrusive thoughts, and it doesn't mean that you're going to suddenly become, an act on these thoughts altogether. It could be something that came from a film you might have watched, a conversation you've had. It could be something that you've heard somebody else say. So I just want to say to you, please don't be worrying about these intrusive thoughts, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be acting out these thoughts. I just wanted to make that clear. So when we try to solve these thoughts, the more attention and urgency we give to that thought, the more significant the brain thinks it is. So what it starts to do is it puts you into a cycle, and the cycle works in this way, right? A frightening thought appears, you then become alarmed by that thought, you then start to analyse that thought, and then your anxiety starts to increase because you've started to analyse it. And then that thought then becomes even more important, and the cycle keeps repeating over and over again. And the problem is not that you have these thoughts, we all have strange thoughts every now and again. The problem is the fear and the meaning that we attach to that thought, because us as human beings have to have some sort of meaning behind what we're thinking about. And that can be the really scary part about it. One of the most important things I help clients understand is this: thoughts are mental events. They are not, and I repeat this, they are not intentions. They are not decisions. And they are definitely not predictions. And I want you to know that they aren't proof of your character. Many people who experience intrusive thoughts are deeply distressed by them because those thoughts go against what matters to them the most. The thought is really frightening because it feels so wrong to you inside. And this fear is often not, I want this, because obviously you don't. The fear is, what if this means something about me? And that distinction is incredibly important, because your mind can create a thought without that thought representing who you are. Our thoughts don't define who we are as a person. Not all of them. So I want you to bear that in mind. So how can therapy help reduce the fear around thoughts? Well, the goal is not to force your mind to never have unwanted thoughts, because that's just not realistic. We all have these unwanted thoughts every now and again. Thoughts might come up when you read something on Facebook or TikTok or whatever. But the goal is to change your relationship with those thoughts and not to be scared of them. Through my Heart to Heal method, I help people to understand how anxiety influences your thinking patterns. It helps you to understand and recognise intrusive thoughts as stress responses rather than facts. It helps you to reduce the fear and emotional charge attached to those thoughts. It helps you to regulate your nervous system more effectively and to process underlying anxiety and emotional pressure. It also helps you to rebuild self-trust and confidence. And when you start to feel these shifts, people will often notice that they have less fear around the thoughts that they're having. It also reduces anxiety and rumination. It gives you a greater sense of emotional calm. It improves confidence in yourself, so you feel more confident in handling thoughts that come up that you're not, not really thoughts that you normally would think about. And it gives you a stronger sense of control. And that's not because every thought disappears, because they won't. But it's because thoughts no longer have the same power over you. They can't have that grip on you. They are just thoughts. They are not threats. They are not you. They are just thoughts that you've been having. And they can come from a whole host of places. If you've ever been frightened by your own mind, I want you to remember this, okay? The presence of thoughts doesn't define you or your character. What matters is how you respond to them thoughts. So I'd like to leave you with this one question. What if the thought you have been judging yourself for is actually the thought your anxious brain has been using to try to protect you? Sometimes healing doesn't begin by fighting every single thought. Sometimes it begins by understanding that a thought is simply that, it's simply a thought. I've noticed I've said thought quite a lot of times in this video. If these thoughts are causing you significant distress, affecting your daily life, or leaving you feeling frightened by your own mind, support is available. You don't have to continue carrying that fear alone. With the right understanding and support, it is possible to reduce the power of these thoughts, hold and develop a healthy relationship with your mind. If this video resonates with you, then please subscribe and follow along for more content on anxiety, intrusive thoughts, emotional resilience, and nervous system regulation. You can also find my weekly newsletter on LinkedIn, and it's called Brotherhood Brief, and I also have permission to pause. And this is where I share deeper reflections, practical strategies for emotional well-being. And if you'd like to explore working with me through the Heart to Heal method, you'll find more information in the description box below. Thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.